maybe it'll even get to structured UI versus unstructured UI as well, which is graphical versus conversational interfaces as well.
Structured data is usually like somebody deliberately thinking and putting structure, some sort of abstract on the real world, whereas most of the unstructured data is much closer to the ground reality. Product position that we are taking is that let humans talk in the human language.
Algorithm probably needs a lot of labels, annotations, and structured data.
This is where there's something magical about human conversations. The technology is getting close enough to emulate.
The skills required for this will probably require more think time, which I'm willing to do in text.
As long as we have a model for it in our brain, we can do pattern matching much faster with the visual thing.
If Microsoft couldn't get around with that, how will a dynamic UI get around with that?
Expectation from AI is that it's able to handle things at the same level of complexity and intellect as a human being. One of the biggest point of friction in distribution for a startup is that nobody knows you.
Hey, Amit.
Hey,
Good
it's
to be
been a
back.
while that good to be back.
Yep, absolutely. I'm gonna make sure we have focus here, literally so that at least nobody disturbs us until tomorrow morning. Um, but how were the last couple of months?
It's been good. A lot of fun building. I think we're still at a stage where, like on a weekend, I can do a lot of rough prototyping and then discuss with the team
Briefing.
during the week.
You're not calling it vibe coding. For that, you need to be a 22-year-old, maybe.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, but it's great to be back. And of course,
Mm.
the topic of today is really around data. And
Yeah.
it's probably around the idea of versus. We continue the idea of versus,
Mm.
this versus that.
Yeah.
And of course, I'm a big believer in the both and thinking. So I hope that we can conclude with the idea of both and versus this
Yeah.
versus, because this versus makes it a zero sum game. But it's around data. We've talked a
Mm.
lot about this in the past as well.
Mm.
We did an episode on apps versus agents. And we want to talk about structured versus unstructured data.
Yeah.
And maybe it'll even get to structured UI versus unstructured UI as well, which is graphical versus conversational interfaces as well. So
Yeah.
there's a lot of this versus that to talk about. Why don't we get straight in? Like, what's your thesis for data? And then we'll take it from there.
So traditionally, there's been a lot more of unstructured data than structured data, right? Structured data is usually like somebody deliberately thinking and putting structure, some sort of abstraction on the real world, whereas most of the unstructured data is much closer to the ground reality. But earlier, we didn't have the tools and techniques to aggregate a lot of unstructured data to get to meaningful results. And as a result, kind of this process of structuring the data was a necessary step in the middle to say to do something with it. Like for example, the thing that I'm obsessing over these days is conversations with.
Can you just hold on 1 second? One moment, yeah? One moment.
Yeah.
I'm going to stop for a moment.
Yeah, so what I was saying was that traditionally we had to put some structure around unstructured data to be able to do anything meaningful with it, whether it's filtering or aggregation, counting, any of that stuff, even joins. And the thing that I'm obsessing over right now is a lot of customer conversation. And what I feel is that the real truth really lies in those conversation about your customer relationships. So traditionally, people have relied a lot on like reps or somebody figuring out structured fields and putting that in Salesforce, and then the entire business kind of GTM machinery runs on that structured data. But a lot gets lost in that translation.
Maybe one thing
And
you could talk about is when we look at the new world,
yeah.
let's say pre-training,
Hmm.
and then we put humans to label stuff and
Yeah.
annotate stuff.
Yeah.
So we try to put some meaning to a lot of unstructured data.
Yeah.
And then finally, by the time it ends up in the neural net, the deep neural net,
Hmm.
there's even more structure. I mean, there is
Hmm.
real layers and layers and the way you put
Hmm.
weights and biases and all that
Yeah.
stuff.
Yeah. Yeah.
So at the end of the day, how does all this look like in the pipeline of going from the World Wide Web and crawling it to the way we actually go put annotations and labels to the way it gets put
Hmm.
together in the model itself?
Hmm.
And the idea that humans are doing things like the way OpenAI got it done, uh,
Yeah.
like 4 years ago,
Yeah.
to where you talked about the salesperson trying to put some manual
Yeah.
label on things with.
Yeah.
So how will all this, like in the last 3 4 years, how has the AI pipeline been created versus how will all this look for the salesperson in the future?
So it's interesting. You're trying to bring two things that have been so far apart in my mind, but maybe they can
Yeah,
come
because I
closer,
only
right?
looked at business people as labelers.
Yeah.
Right? And I think there's
Yeah.
something to be said about, okay, which part of this the model can do because it knows a lot based on unstructured data.
Yeah. Yeah.
And
Yeah.
uh, where would you need a human to label it, and whether you even need data structures like tables and rows for anything. So
Hmm.
there's two different things here. Who
Yeah.
gets to label now?
Hmm.
And the next question is, do I still need data structures?
Hmm. 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 Uh, I, I do think you need data structures, but they are kind of like similar to materialized views in my mind, that the ground truth is there in the unstructured data. And sure, you're driving some structures out of it to be able to compute things, and you're caching those structures for efficiency. Um, but that's not your ground truth in
Yeah,
the
so again, going back to how even we are trying to make AI work, you can start with
yeah.
the analogy of, crawl everything,
Hmm.
send it to scale AI and let them
Hmm.
label and annotate everything.
Hmm.
They
Hmm.
were the business people, like the sales
Yeah. Yeah.
guy or gal
Yeah.
you spoke of, who was
Yeah.
doing things in
Yeah.
all these ways. Talk about that parallel, and does the parallel hold, first of all? Is it a good analogy of what really structured data and these sales reps were actually doing with CRM
Yeah.
in the last
Yeah. Yeah.
25, 30 years?
Uh, let's see if we can bring them together, because right now they're a little far apart in my mind. Because
Mm-hmm.
if you really talk about how LLMs are trained, right, the first pre-training phase has almost no labeling involved, right? There is maybe some in the sense that somebody is broadly deciding what data to include and what data not to include, like what's high quality data source versus low quality data source. So there is some human labeling going in there, but beyond that, you just training the neural net to do the next token prediction using a mix of collection of documents from internet.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And then the labeling came from first when people were doing RLHF to then fine tune these models to be better at instruction following and
Yeah, because there was
human
a
preference up.
certain because there was a certain model of the world.
Yeah, yeah,
Now, in a business, you don't have billions and trillions of documents,
yeah, yeah.
right? So the model of the world that has been created
Hmm,
versus the model of the business,
hmm,
like who works on what?
hmm.
In a product company, for example,
Yeah.
or what's the severity of a ticket or a complaint coming
Hmm,
from a customer?
Yeah. Yeah.
Um, there's a model because they have contracts.
Hmm.
Platinum tier customers get this kind of
Hmm.
escalation versus gold tier versus whatever tier. Uh, and all of that is a model of the business,
Hmm.
which is based on the contracts that this provider has signed with its customers, for example. I don't
Yeah.
have billions of documents to give to a model to really say,
Yeah.
okay, figure this out, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
So
Yeah.
we got to quickly get to uh, a conclusion about what good looks like with the model,
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
So there needs to be some sort of labeling fast enough to say, okay, this
Hmm.
is the way we actually sort all this
Hmm.
out.
Hmm. Hmm.
So given that problem statement, given the fact that these frontier models are great at generalized wisdom and generalized
Hmm.
model of the world,
Hmm.
uh, how do you really go from there to the model of the business,
Hmm. Hmm.
uh, where I don't have that kind of a way to train it from
Hmm.
scratch?
Yeah, so you definitely need your like prompts with a rich set of examples to achieve the kind of labeling that you want, right? So, um, what is stage two in your business is not stage two in my business. And so it's like somebody needs to explain what is a stage two and at what point do I label this opportunity as stage two, or what is priority zero, severity one versus priority one, severity zero, or something like
Mm.
that, right?
But what I also believe that prompts alone,
Hmm,
they take away structure.
hmm, hmm, hmm,
And I also know the power of text to SQL. I mean, I'm
hmm,
preaching to the
hmm.
choir about,
Yeah,
somebody who's been working on this for the last 12 years now.
yeah, yeah,
Uh, I know that if I can give it a model of the world, which is my SQL
yeah,
schema,
yeah, yeah, yeah.
and the interlinkages between my
Hmm,
tables,
hmm, hmm,
because that's the way the departments talk to each other, and
hmm, hmm, hmm,
my
hmm.
connections to my customer, all that
Yeah,
stuff is through
yeah,
some bunch of tables and
yeah, yeah, yeah.
metadata and data. I know that if I can preserve that structure,
Mhm.
then dynamically, the language models are way better at actually
Yeah,
understanding my business model.
yeah, yeah,
So I'm trying to get to a point that prompts alone will
yeah,
flatten things.
yeah,
And many a time we're having to come up with these intermediate models of
yeah,
my
yeah,
business
yeah,
that then can be used by these frontier models to generate SQL,
yeah, yeah.
to understand my. So would these two worlds have to coexist? Uh,
So, yeah, I definitely think so that we would have data structures and we would have compute over those data structures, whether that's through SQL or Python or whatever is necessary, right? But earlier, our interface to this was so tied to these structured, like data structures, that like somebody had to sit down and fill all those Salesforce fields, all those
mhm.
Jira fields, and A, they it's just work that mostly people don't enjoy, and B, there's a lot that's left in the unstructured data in those conversations that you just can't capture in a structured field. And if you lose the linkage to the unstructured data, a lot of fidelity is lost,
Yep.
right?
By the way, it's a great point what you just said, because people hate Salesforce's massive amounts of customization anyway.
Yeah.
To the point where what we were trying to achieve with these human labelers who are sales
Hmm.
reps who are trying to put, a lot of things into structure,
Yeah.
created immense chaos
Yeah.
for the CRM to never be even be renderable in a graphical UI. So there's something to be said about that.
Yeah, I mean, I've heard like sales teams being utterly confused at which fields they're supposed to fill in which stage of the sales cycle because the whole thing gets so complicated. And there's genuine reason for it to be complicated because somebody else is trying to capture all of that information and then run some analysis on it so that they can make some strategic decisions. But I don't think in future that complication is required. And when you remove that sort of impedance mismatch in the middle, you also get a lot more higher fidelity information out.
So what are you removing? Are you removing the human labeler, the sales rep's responsibility?
Yeah,
Because otherwise we're paying them like a glorified scale AI worker or something. Just go
yeah,
put all
yeah,
this
yeah,
stuff
yeah,
and make
yeah,
sure it's all right, and I'll call you if it's not right, and so on.
yeah, yeah.
Versus
So
the data structure itself.
yeah, so I think there's two things. So you just had a conversation with your customer, and the transcript is there. It has a lot of information. You can infer a lot of fields, but then there is some amount of cognitive work that's left to process that conversation and figure out what actually happened. How do I interpret it? Right. And even that interpretation right now, mostly like either comes in some very short notes or comes in these structured fields that people have created, right? But um, the real output of that intellectual work is usually in some conversation between the sales rep and their manager. Like, hey, what do you think? Is this for real or not? Do we really have a champion here or not?
Mm-hmm.
And when you ask that question, then more information comes out, and that
Mm-hmm.
information usually goes in void, right? And when you're sitting in the forecast call and trying to figure out what's what, that's the information you're missing. And then
Mm-hmm.
somebody comes up with a brilliant idea that, like, let's make a field that says strength of champion on a scale of 1 to 5. Now you have to
Mm-hmm.
think through one
Mm-hmm.
through five and enter it.
Mm-hmm.
And now
Mm-hmm.
there's another layer of bureaucracy for the salesperson to fill, and
Mm-hmm.
they just put
Mm-hmm.
something random, as
Mm-hmm.
opposed to just tapping into that conversation that happened between the rep and their manager,
Mm-hmm.
and then
But there's a
using,
compute cost of this too. I mean, at the
yeah,
end of the day, when you say tapping into,
yeah,
I think there was some computation that was already done in the rep's mind,
yeah, yeah,
right? Which is the strength of a champion.
yeah,
Now, obviously, it's inconsistent with another rep because
yeah,
there are obviously all sorts of reps and they think of strength being very different thing. If you're from Japan, you'll think differently than if you're from Europe versus
yeah,
the swashbuckling US rep. It's very, very
yeah,
different.
yeah,
So there's value in consistency in letting
yeah.
it being done by the machine. But there's also a compute cost to all this stuff too.
I so even the consistency part, like even if you put a 5 point scale, how people will interpret that 5 point scale would be very subjective. Or like if you just ask them and how they describe it in language, that will also be subjective. So I don't think we're getting rid of that subjectivity. But
Well, I mean, it's the model doing it, so it's going to do it
yeah,
for all conversations, recordings, things like that.
yeah,
It's definitely more objective than the layers of,
yeah,
sort
yeah,
of interpretation that happen
yeah,
because
yeah,
people have cognitive biases across
yeah, yeah.
themselves. But there was something about, I mean, you mentioned you removing some things, and I actually really agree with what you said because obviously the status quo is abhorring, like, the way
Yeah,
we've created so many fields. And it was done for the sales ops person
yeah,
because the VP wanted things to be that way,
yeah,
because they wanted a process to be followed and so on, right?
yeah, yeah.
Uh, Yet they're trying to figure out consistency. All they're trying to figure out is consistency. So the funnel
Hmm,
across their region and for a CRO across the world
hmm,
looks summarizable, roll upable. You
hmm.
can roll up, you can aggregate, you can summarize, and you can
Eh,
put some model of forecasting behind it.
Yeah. And there's also this idea of a checklist, right? That did you think about this? Did you think about this? Did you think about this? And trying to force
Yeah,
that.
yeah, yeah, absolutely. So, what will change between the hateful state we are in
Hmm.
to where we are headed?
So at least the product position that we are taking is that let humans talk in the human language. And so when we have to download the thinking that's there in the rep, instead of asking them to fill a form, we spin up a conversational agent that just talks to them and would talk to them in the same way that a sales manager would. They're like, hey, what do you think? How did this meeting go? Do
Mm-hmm.
you really think there's a champion here? We still don't know the why behind why they would buy this quarter,
Mm-hmm.
and and then capture that in free form and
Mm-hmm.
have enough richness in that conversation that it would have everything that, like, if you had designed the perfect form structure, you'd
Mm-hmm.
have gotten maybe more.
Mm-hmm.
But then this unstructured data is a lot more richer, a lot easier to capture.
Yeah, and it's
And
on the go. I think they can
yeah,
do this if voice is available. They can do this
yeah,
anywhere and everywhere as well.
yeah, yeah,
And in many ways, it's now a manager, mentor,
yeah,
assistant, whatever it is, you know.
yeah, 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 yeah,
But eventually, where is it going to start to not just store it? Because storing
mm,
of recording is easy,
yeah, yeah, yeah,
but you have to go from that storage
mm,
of data to information
yeah, yeah,
that can then be processed and analyzed and
yeah,
aggregated and rolled up. So it looks like somebody's got to still do that and put that
yeah,
in something more structured
yeah, yeah.
for some numbers to come out. Am I saying it right?
Yeah, yeah. So, like, once you have had that conversation, then you absolutely want to go and write down whether you have crossed off the M and then C and the I of the medic and
Medpic.
medpic, right?
Mm-hmm,
And
mm-hmm,
then you want to be able to filter and say what are all the opportunities where I do have a champion versus I don't have a champion.
mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
And
So what did we just do here? We basically said the manager's role or the mentor's role
hmm,
can be done by an agent,
yeah,
right? This manager, mentor, agent will probably also have to look at email records and Zoom recordings apart from their
yeah,
own recordings,
yeah, yeah, yeah,
right?
yeah,
Because there are things happening in situ with the customer and
yeah,
so on as well. Um, Now we have three sets of recordings. The stuff that's going on email, the stuff that's happening in maybe text messages and
yeah,
uh, in Zoom recordings, and
hmm,
finally this agent to human
yeah,
recording as well.
yeah,
And then we said, okay, process all this stuff, but put it in a data structure.
yeah,
So we got rid of the pesky discussion that the manager always had to ping the rep for.
yeah,
Like, hey,
yeah,
what's going on? And obviously, the manager is not good at the medpic thinking anyway,
yeah,
so there's something about that as well. But the manager is also a human being who understood not to keep bringing in process for every call because it
yeah.
gets repeatable, boring. It's like, dude, I'm in stage seven. Please don't ask me those questions that I'm supposed to be asked. And I'm a 3-year-old rep here.
Yeah,
Please don't ask me those questions again or something. So
yeah,
we'll
yeah,
talk about user interface and design and all of
yeah,
this stuff
yeah,
because
yeah,
if
yeah,
it gets
yeah,
pesky, it gets banished too, you know.
yeah,
So
yeah,
we'll
yeah.
talk about your design sort of sense on this.
Hmm.
But we got rid of that pesky email once a week from the forecast call, that pipeline call that people are doing. We also got rid of the human basically rep going and doing some stuff with fields. We
Hmm.
probably got rid of a lot of fields as well because we don't
Yeah,
need those fields.
yeah, yeah,
Um, but if we have those fields, we probably still need to keep them hidden somewhere.
yeah, yeah, yeah,
They're not supposed to be open to the browser's right-hand pane and the record view and things like that. Is that an important removal as well? The fact that you don't need a lot of human visible fields?
yeah. So I would just put that in the bucket of progressive disclosure, that like all of that exists somewhere, but it doesn't need to be in your face,
Yeah,
right?
yeah. So
And
basically, maybe there's collapsible columns
yeah,
and
yeah,
and so on. But what are we getting to? We're getting to the point where you still need to keep a lot of this stuff, process it,
hmm,
and put structure on it.
hmm,
Because if I didn't, then the context window gets too large
Yeah.
across,
Yeah.
1,000 reps and 10,000 recordings to look at it. There's
Yeah.
no freaking way I can actually give that to an LLM.
Yeah. Yeah.
So
Yeah. Yeah.
just to make things achievable,
Hmm.
because I could easily say, I'll just stitch these attachments to an opportunity record.
Hmm.
And now at runtime, I'll let SQL compiler go figure out how to do all this stuff.
Hmm. Hmm.
Because there's
Hmm.
a
Hmm.
compiler and you can do
Yeah.
UDF functions and that. And
Yeah. Yeah.
that UDF function could call an ML code that actually
Hmm.
looks at all
Hmm.
this or whatever. So there is the idea that you need to pre-process some of those recordings
Hmm. Hmm.
into structure. So the context window is better when we're doing roll-ups and aggregates. Say more
Yeah.
on that.
So I do think like the traditional aggregation is here to stay, right? Uh, we would still be saying like, okay, what's the probability of this deal closing and what's the size of the deal? Let's multiply that. Let's get expected revenue, add it up, do some projections and or whatever else that people do in their forecasting calls, right?
Mhm. And let's riff on it because
Yeah,
when we argue for the opposite, we'll find it to be clunky.
yeah,
See, what's the alternative? Let's say we didn't have those tables and, you know, any amount of pre-processing going on.
yeah,
All we had was recordings, recordings, and more recordings.
yeah,
How would
yeah,
that
yeah.
state even work?
So actually, I've been doing some interesting things on that domain, and there is a lot of interesting ways of aggregating that data to get to meaningful results. And the kinds of things that we're seeing is like, what are the systemic problems in this business can be inferred by aggregating a lot of information across these calls. Like,
But
you
those
know,
are somewhat exception workflows or reports or
hmm,
whatever
yeah,
versus the
yeah,
norm of forecasting.
yeah, 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 yeah,
So are those additional workflows and additional insights
yeah,
more
yeah.
than the
Yeah, so those are things like, you know what, this company, the biggest problem is sales reps are really amazing at doing like vertical specific selling and value-based selling, but they suck at,
sorry, one moment, one moment.
yeah. No, so yeah, what I was saying was that th those workflows are like, okay, by looking at all these calls, what we realize is that your sales reps are doing an amazing job of selling value, selling vertically, but they suck at technical due diligence and making sure that the problem that the customer has can actually be solved by the product. And these are the ways in which the product is falling short. These are the ways in which qualification is falling short. Yeah, I think this
Mhm.
this kind of visibility just wasn't there before.
And the algorithm that's doing all this, aggregation,
Yeah,
maybe even clustering and classification,
yeah,
um, obviously has to, first of all, understand that it's doing classification, which is what Gong does. Gong does a lot
yeah,
of that, and Gong
yeah,
does labeling and things like that.
yeah.
But then how do you really figure out more complex
Hmm.
organization of all this stuff,
Yeah,
maybe
yeah,
across different kinds of rep types and regions and things like that?
yeah,
That algorithm probably needs a lot of labels, annotations, and structured data. Is
yeah,
that a good
yeah,
way of
yeah,
putting it?
yeah, yeah,
Yeah.
yeah,
So it looks like we have riffed this enough.
yeah, yeah,
And maybe one last attempt at saying, suppose we didn't have any structured data.
yeah, yeah,
There were no data structures.
yeah,
The only data structure was a prompt
yeah.
that went to an LLM.
Hmm.
Will that world work? And why do we have structured data? And why do we have LLM calling a friend like Python interpreter or a SQL
Hmm.
compiler? I mean,
Hmm.
just say a few words on that, or
Yeah, so I
calling
mean,
into an MCP server, for that matter.
yeah, I mean, LLMs in general are bad at math, right? Um, and when you're trying to sum up a billion numbers, you never get an accurate result
Hmm. Hmm.
by just relying on LLM's inference, and you
Hmm.
shouldn't. Like,
Mm-hmm.
It's just not the right tool for it.
Mm-hmm. So maybe what you're saying is that, look, we'll continue to have lots of use cases for deterministic, uh, you know, call out
Yeah,
into
yeah,
a
yeah,
SQL compiler,
yeah,
into a Python interpreter,
yeah,
into an MCP server that's calling legacy APIs.
yeah,
And there'll be enough things that we have to do probabilistically,
yeah,
which are new use cases that never existed in the past.
yeah, yeah, yeah.
Is that a good way of summarizing this?
Yeah, and like a couple of other things that we're riffing at, right? Which is, can we simplify all this like massive amount of customization that happens in Salesforce,
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm,
right?
mm-hmm,
So you don't have to do like note down like 20 different fields for like a
mm-hmm,
POC
mm-hmm, mm-hmm,
when you don't really use it. Like you can either have machine infer it and never make it visible, or you can go back retroactively and say, like, I have the ground truth. I can reconstruct and get new fields. Like,
mm-hmm,
was there at least 10 users in the POC process or not? I
mm-hmm,
don't need a rep to enter that.
mm-hmm,
Like,
mm-hmm.
if I have the data around,
Maybe there's
I
one
can,
last thing there, which is
yeah,
also about the transition.
yeah,
Because the providers of software have not provided all this stuff, Salesforce
yeah,
included,
mm,
and it's work in progress. I mean, it's not like Gong has done an amazing job of this and so on. So there's going to
yeah,
be, a lot of transitional sort of world here as well.
yeah,
But the reps continue to do exactly all of that because the agents are not ready and the providers are not ready,
yeah, yeah.
and all that. So what do you uh, foresee the next 3 to 5 years to look like until amp it up actually, or amp up becomes that pervasive?
Yeah. I Yeah, I think it's definitely an interesting world, right? Like everybody that I talk to is convinced that there is some way that AI is going to help them, and if they don't find it, they will be at a disadvantage, but they don't know what that way is. And there's so many answers being presented to them that it's somewhat confusing and discombobulating. And so that's where a little bit of distrust comes in and it's like, yeah,
Well, and
I've
I
heard a
think there
million
is,
stories like this, right?
and by the way, there's another piece around short-term hacks,
Yeah,
which is I'm just going to throw people in the problem for short-term
yeah, yeah,
versus long-term or mid to long-term AI agent coming and doing all that.
yeah, yeah,
And also the fact that I don't have enough good people to build these agents,
yeah,
right? I mean, that's the other piece as well, that everybody's busy building their product,
yeah,
that they don't have the best AI ops people who are actually saying, let me build the best process for this business.
yeah,
Because
yeah,
everything you're saying will require some level of, building an agent, building some skills, doing
yeah,
all
yeah,
that stuff. Or are
yeah,
you saying
yeah.
it's all magical? I can vibe code my way into that.
No, I mean that's what brings that maybe brings us to like the verticalization, right? I, None of this is easy. I mean, a demo is really easy to do in this world, but to make it work consistently, none of this is easy and does require a lot of iteration and possibly like some forward deployed engineering
Mm-hmm,
and
mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
and good taste in like how you design your system, how you
I
design
love the
your
way you say
prompts, and
good taste when, you went a little wistful with your eyes. I'm like, hey, that's amazing. That's an artist in you talking. Conversational UI
yeah,
uh, versus graphical UI. Back to structured as an unstructured, by the way,
yeah, yeah.
in many ways. But maybe let's start out with your idea of being the prompt that you will record all this stuff for the rep.
Hmm.
But it has to be really smart, man, because there's obviously the life cycle of the opportunity,
Yeah,
and then there's the tenure of the rep,
yeah,
both in this company and in the industry.
hmm.
Uh, how are you going to navigate all this? Because it needs to be designed well so that it doesn't become so pesky
Yeah, yeah.
that people are like, man, I'm just going to ignore this thing.
Yeah, I I think. this is where there's something magical about human conversations that the technology is getting close enough to emulate. So imagine, like, let's say you wanted to learn about your users and you send a UX researcher who goes in one-on-one talks with everyone versus you
Mhm.
send them a Google form to fill out. The amount of difference in like the depth of data that you collect because the conversations are very dynamic and it's like contextual that like I'm hearing about this, so I'm going to ask about this, and then this leads me to this next other question, this leads to next other question, as opposed to like I have a checklist of 20 things that I need to collect from you.
Mm. But don't you feel like if it's a repeatable chore of a voice recording or an
Yeah,
interview that needs to happen,
yeah,
it's probably going to be as pesky as a manager calling, a day before the forecast or pipeline call. Unless it's so good emotionally, empathetically, contextually.
yeah, yeah,
And we tried doing this for one of our agentic work where
yeah.
prompts just didn't cut it. We had to actually build an SFTRL, like a post-trained model, because the
Mm, mm.
long horizon conversations were important.
Yeah,
If
yeah,
you made it into a chore, like once a week,
yeah.
so are you worried about those things?
So I think in order to have high quality conversation, you have to do a lot of pre-work to assemble all the context there. And so, like, you know the playbook of the company, you know the stage at which the opportunity is, you
Mm-hmm.
have gone through the transcript and extracted everything that
Mm-hmm.
could be extracted. So you're not
Mm-hmm.
asking obvious questions.
Mm-hmm.
But at the same time,
And the
you,
processing or latency processing, you have to talk about that too, because if you're going to
yeah,
do voice conversations,
yeah,
yeah, it's fine. As long as if it's a customer service call and they're like, man, I just want to get my order through
yeah, yeah,
and I want to just get away from here. I will
yeah,
wait 3 seconds after every response
mm,
versus a white collar employee
yeah,
who is
yeah.
a sales director, asking them like, oh, 6 seconds of wait. So how will all this compute thing work?
So at least what we are doing is we're leaving enough time between when the meeting concludes and when this other conversation happens. So we have enough time to do the homework, to be ready for that conversation. It can't happen just the minute that anyways, the transcription software today also takes some time before it becomes available. So
No, but my thing is that there's a React loop,
yeah,
and even
yeah,
the best OpenAI hardware and data center,
yeah.
still there's 2 to 3 seconds there. There's all sorts of things that need to happen, especially if it's a deeper white-collared conversation,
Mm, mm,
as
mm.
opposed to arm's length, where is my order in a conversation. So the skills required for this will probably
Yeah,
require more think time, which I'm willing to do in text. I can say thinking and all this stuff,
yeah,
and
yeah, yeah, yeah.
versus, man, you are trying to record this. You better be real time. So, what are your thoughts on that?
Uh, So our agents right now, usually the time between the user's turn ends and when this guy starts speaking is somewhere around half a second. Occasionally, it does go to 2 to 3 seconds, and that's a bit annoying, and we are trying to solve that.
And this is a weekly discussion. So, it's
Hmm.
a fairly straightforward sequence of questions. Uh,
Um, so the
or
kinds
are you
of
saying it's going to be so dynamic and so thoughtful and so coming up with different kinds of questions that it can all be done in half a second?
So so what we're trying to do is like capture like essentially emulate debriefing of every meeting, right? So like sometime after the meeting has happened, you log into this thing and this thing has already processed the transcripts, come up with the right set of questions to ask, processed what has happened before the opportunity. Um,
And you're
like,
not worried about the Clippy moment. Remember Clippy from 20 years
yeah,
ago? It was pesky. It was all
yeah,
over you all the time.
yeah.
So,
I mean,
how are you
like,
thinking about design?
so I think the persona that we're giving this agent is that of a chief of staff plus coach combined, right? And as a coach, it's kind of it's trying to see how can I give this rep an edge in this opportunity. And so everything is kind of designed from that perspective. And as a chief of staff is just trying to see how can I automate certain tasks for this rep. And essentially the tasks have already been automated. How do I gather the input that's required for those tasks? Like if I have to write an email, follow-up email, if I have to update the CRM, if I have to send a message to internal stakeholders, um, those that automation is already done, but the all the input may not be there. So where are the gaps? And
And this requires anything other than a one-way monologue from because you could have a stream of consciousness,
hmm,
but you're saying I need for the rep to be mindful
yeah,
and to remember the checklist, which is exactly what those structured fields were supposed to
hmm,
be, which they
hmm,
hated after all. Like, man, if I have to update all this stuff. So, what's the parallel to the old world of structured Salesforce fields
hmm.
and these questions being asked? Because they're both design problems.
Yeah. So I think that the biggest problem in that world was that there's a lot of stuff that's relatively obvious that could be inferred from the conversation that just happened.
So
And
then why wouldn't
you're,
you apply the same thing to the Zoom recording or the Plod recording? Because they could just carry a Plod
yeah, yeah,
with them and just keep it on the table.
yeah. Yeah, so I mean, transcripts are always super useful, right?
Hmm.
Whichever way you get them. But then when you come to the system of record, so what's the purpose of
By the way, and I'm just pushing you hard on this because I feel like, this is great to actually, get the design things clear in our heads. I mean,
yeah,
even in my head, I mean, at some level,
yeah, yeah, yeah,
there's no panacea here. I mean, if you just
yeah,
move it
yeah.
from the structured fields of Salesforce, which were hateful, to a new prompt, which is going to be equally
Mm.
repetitive, then
So
they have a
by the
solution.
way, we are not trying to make these things easy for the app. Uh, we're
Well,
trying
then
to
they'll bypass it. If it's not easy for the rep, it's the Clippy moment. They'll bypass it. And
no,
you still need
as
the
in
manager to intervene now.
like this agent we've designed will go and say that like 24 minutes in the meeting, the customer revealed some pain point and you completely glossed over it and went to the next topic. Could we
Hmm.
not have dug deeper into that?
Hmm.
What's your
Hmm.
thoughts on that?
Hmm. Hmm.
And then, like, if that's a valid point, then let's write an email that actually goes and talks about
Hmm.
that pain point
Hmm.
and tries to get another meeting to talk about that pain point.
Hmm.
So
Hmm.
in that sense, it's like hard on you, but in your corner kind of thing.
Hmm. Hmm. Hmm.
You could never do that with a Salesforce form.
Yeah, and it looks like their goals are different too. One of
Yeah,
them is about reporting to the house,
yeah,
so the house can roll it up
yeah,
for their region and for their quarter and for their
yeah,
month, versus one is for the rep and
yeah,
better
yeah,
coaching.
yeah,
So I'm guessing that these two, one which is an individualistic trainer,
yeah,
optimizer,
yeah,
very different than what you need to do in the aggregate for the house. Am I
yeah.
saying it right?
So this is where kind of, like you're wrapping broccoli into chocolate. And so saying that like if you do this, you don't have to go fill up the Salesforce form because we would have all the information. We would just go and fill it.
Mhm.
But at the same time, you also get some coaching that will make your execution better.
Good. I mean, I'd love to actually see because it looks like there's going to be a ton of frictional thinking, design thinking, removing
Yeah,
friction, not making it a chore.
yeah, yeah,
Because most creative people, they get bored by repetitive stuff.
yeah, yeah,
And even the idea of too much prompt engineering, because
yeah.
if you're going to prompt it like the way the manager used to prompt the rep, by the way,
Mm.
that prompt was equally hateful for the rep. They're like, dude, yet another thing. And I'm like, okay, are we still working? It's still work in progress. Don't bug me, right? And it was a data collection prompt engineering that the
Yeah,
CRO had actually prompted their
yeah,
VP, and
yeah,
the VP had to prompt their district manager.
yeah,
So
yeah,
there was a lot of prompt engineering which was highly repetitive.
yeah, yeah,
So
yeah,
you'll have to
yeah,
think hard about making it extremely interesting and dynamic and serendipitous and all that. Like, oh wow, like bringing in news from the other parts of the organization and all
yeah,
that stuff. So I think
yeah,
it's going to require some. I mean, I'm really eagerly waiting for some of that as well because I
yeah,
feel like beyond a point, it has to be encoded into a post-trained model because you have so much stuff that can be so dynamic.
yeah, yeah,
And so the human machine interface for a white collared worker, a senior white collared worker, versus an SDR will probably
yeah,
be two different things. There's prompt engineering with the frontier model, repeat, repeat, repeat,
yeah,
versus oh, prompts just don't work here,
yeah, yeah, yeah,
right?
mm,
Maybe let's switch to UI, structured
yeah,
versus unstructured
yeah.
as well. Are you already thinking about your design problem now? Because I see you a little bit like like thinking hard about, okay, I don't want a Clippy moment, Um,
Yeah, yeah. I mean, Clippy had very different, like the bar of intelligence it needed to hit and the amount of intelligence it had, there was a giant gaping hole there.
yeah, but it was
Uh,
trying to do very simple tasks like
yeah,
copy paste or,
yeah, yeah,
some
yeah,
simple
yeah,
stuff too. So,
yeah,
I mean, while the intelligence was low, the tasks were also considered to be, now you're talking about way bigger tasks and
yeah,
things like
yeah,
that.
yeah, yeah,
It's going to be, I think design is never going to leave us, honestly,
yeah,
and
yeah,
going to be
yeah,
with us
yeah,
forever. And I think it's just, I know it's a digression, but I think it's just because, like, I think quantum particles, they just take the least friction kind of thing as well. Humans just take the path of least resistance and all that, and they're going to bypass everything that is going to be highly frictional.
yeah.
But yeah, let's talk about structured UI versus unstructured UI. What's the role of both? Just like we talked about data.
Mm, mm. So at least in my mind, UI kind of is an input-output thing, right? That like you need to collect inputs from the human brain and you need to feed information to the human brain. And at least for feeding information into human brain, the the visual path has a lot more bandwidth than than just simple like whatever you can read versus what you can see. You get a
Well,
lot more
that's
information.
very profound, man, what you just said, because I think Jan LeCun talked about it like maybe a year ago.
Yeah.
But I didn't think you'd take this path. It's a very interesting one. I mean, I'm loving it. It's 11:45, 11:52 right now. I'm like, man, PM for both of us. We're gonna have a good discussion in this one. So yeah,
Yeah.
keep going, keep going. I think this is a good
Yeah.
path.
So like whenever you want to give a large amount of information, you can't rely on somebody sitting there and reading. Uh, I guess large amount of information rather quickly,
Hmm.
right?
You're
So
basically saying that it's monodimensional versus multidimensional with enough
yeah,
peripheral view.
yeah, yeah,
So there's something about structured UI.
yeah. Yeah.
And of course, you can overdo both. So say more on the overdoing of both, because obviously the visual load and the cognitive
Hmm.
load coming from a visual thing,
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
uh, in some sense, is about too much parallel processing that one has to do
Yeah. Yeah.
visually
Yeah.
versus the sequential processing of a Q&A and prompt and answer and prompt and
Hmm.
answer. So is that what's going on cognitively?
Yeah. So let's say that you wanted to understand in rough terms how your business is going, right?
Mm-hmm.
You can see like three charts and get very high amount of information very quickly and figure out what's going on. Whereas if I start writing what's going on, it's going to take like three paragraphs, and it'll take you a couple of minutes to absorb that. Right? So in that sense, you do need the visual structure wherever it's appropriate, but at the same time,
And why is that? Because the human brain is taking multiple parallel paths to understand something.
yes, as long as we have a model for it in our brain, we can do pattern matching much faster with the visual thing, right?
Because
Like,
you're looking at lots of information
yeah,
and you're
yeah,
absorbing everything.
yeah. So, like, if I show you just like a line graph, which is going up and then going down and then doing a squiggle and then going all the way up, you can look at it in fraction of second and absorb most of it.
Hmm.
If I write it in a paragraph, it's going to
It's
be
because
painful
sequential.
to,
It's sequential in
yeah,
many ways,
yeah,
right?
yeah. But at the same time, if if the design is bad and if I have like too many boxes here,
Hmm.
each of the things doing differently, there's a lot of information, but like I can't process that information because
Hmm.
I don't have a parallel for it in my mind that I can
Hmm.
map it to. Like trajectories we were trained or like evolved for, right? So we can look at something like that. Like,
I mean, even simple tables. I mean,
yeah,
we were having this discussion about rows and columns.
yeah, yeah,
They existed prehistorically as well.
yeah,
Because somehow the brain knows how to organize things in rows and columns,
yeah, yeah, yeah,
and it's probably in our DNA somewhere encoded as well. And I
yeah,
would
yeah.
wager to go all say that it's actually in our DNA as well.
Yeah, yeah,
And to sort a column and
yeah,
to move columns around and so on.
yeah, yeah.
So, okay, it's here to stay. Um, Looks like we've overdone visual. So I think there's a revenge of the unstructured in some sense
Yeah.
with
Yeah.
conversational. How will
The,
both coexist?
so one of the things that used to be a problem before and should be less of a problem going forward more and more is that you didn't have the luxury of crafting the UX of the page based on this moment, right? So like applications get overly complex because it's you write it once and then like hundreds of thousands of people are going to use it and they have disjointed set of not disjoint but like different overlapping set of requirements and you end up coding the whole universe
Hmm.
and
Hmm.
then you have like some settings menu somewhere where you can enable some things disable something but it's still like a giant mess and even if like the application knows everything about me like what I'm looking at this moment what needs to be emphasized where is very different. Like even if I'm looking through 100 customers, the customer one may be in a different stage of life cycle, and what needs to be emphasized is very different than customer two and customer three.
Hmm.
But we were kind of stuck with like, okay, this is the customer card.
Hmm. I mean, when
Um,
you were talking, it reminded me of a la carte versus the Indian thali. You get a thali and it's like, there's like how many of these dishes in there? I'm like, man, which one? So it's like,
yeah,
we created this Indian thali for a dashboard,
yeah,
and
yeah,
there's so many widgets in there.
yeah.
So what are you saying that it's going to be generated on the fly based on the context of the human, or it's going to be conversational, therefore generated even further, like as a singleton widget
Yeah.
conversationally.
So it's kind of so earlier we had like fixed UIs to show things, and then we got the text generation capability and said like, oh, this is so much better because I don't have to go through like 20 widgets on this page. Whatever I need is just like in this one short paragraph. That's great. But then like one paragraph became two paragraph, three paragraph, four paragraph, and now it's like too much information to absorb. And we could use some structure there, but the stuff is kind of right now schemaless, or like the schema of this information is very context dependent. So if we can, along with the information, if we can also generate the corresponding UI element that's designed for this moment, that becomes really beautiful.
Mm-hmm.
And some of this we are seeing in like ChatGPT and Cloud interfaces that they're adding more and more visual elements. But
It's blurring, the lines are blurring between, because
yeah,
they're also coming from the other side of all text to
yeah,
visual,
yeah,
and the business software world was like all visual to text.
yeah, yeah,
The question is, who has a better empty canvas to really design this well, and so on.
yeah, yeah,
But maybe one last thing on exploration.
yeah,
And obviously, when you're building ThoughtSpot, you have to think a lot about drill downs. I mean, the word is
yeah, yeah,
being drilled into you,
yeah,
in the last 15 years, I guess.
yeah,
So I look at that as window shopping. You're like, you're just go casual. You're like, okay, you show me a widget, but I really want to drill, drill, drill. I want to look at
mm,
facets of this data.
yeah.
Um, how will all this be any different now than before, if at all?
Mm. Um, so a few things that comes to my mind. One is that we just talked about output as far as UI is concerned. We didn't talk about input, right? And in input, my thought has always been that like if what you need to specify, the search space is small enough that you could visually represent it, it's much easier for us to just point and click, right?
Mhm.
If the universe of options fits in a seven item menu, it's a lot easier for me to click something. Or if you can give me a bunch of chips for the search query that I want to give under the search bar and I can just point and click, it's a lot easier for me. I don't have to come up with the words.
Mhm.
But if the search space is large, then it becomes very hard to do it visually, and it becomes like language has so much more expressive power that it becomes a lot easier to kind of
Mhm.
type the thing in.
But I also have an empty prompt problem, which is a cold
Yeah.
start problem. And
Yeah.
unless I
The
get
writer's block.
recommendation, yeah, I mean, if I
Yeah.
don't get
Yeah.
recommendations of what to type and
Yeah.
all that
Yeah.
stuff, most people are
Yeah.
not very good at knowing that either. So
Yeah.
I think
Yeah.
visually, when I drop down, I'm like, oh, these are the seven options.
Yeah. Yeah.
So exploration had a lot of hints built into it as
Yeah.
recommendations. They were
Yeah.
recommendations.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
So looks like we still can't bypass all that either, right? Because we have to
Yeah.
continue to do recommendations, right?
Yeah. 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 Yeah.
Not an easy thing to actually resolve. Um, what about other facets of structured UI, like the left nav,
Hmm.
um, and being too dynamic left nav versus the
Hmm.
right nav, which is the record view,
Hmm. Hmm.
which could be a lot more dynamic.
Hmm.
Um, I think there's probably something about what the brain will want to be remembering, because these are habits and I need to know my habits. Please don't change my
Yeah.
habits. I mean, takes me back to Microsoft Word and Excel and PowerPoint. Office went through a massive refresh after Vista. If you
Yeah.
remember that,
The ribbon.
people hated it. They're
Yeah.
like, man, you changed my thing.
Yeah.
So if Microsoft couldn't get around with that, how will a dynamic UI get around with that? given the fact that humans are creatures of habit?
I think so. Things that are relatively consistent. I don't think that stuff should become dynamic all of a sudden, right? But it's a long tail part of the choice architecture that that needs that dynamic stuff, right?
But
So,
in a hierarchical information architecture way, are you saying that the leaves, the records, individual records
hmm,
can get a little bit more dynamic,
hmm,
but the left nav,
hmm,
which is in the information architecture, is much
yeah,
higher up,
yeah,
needs
yeah,
to be a whole lot more static. Maybe some dynamism, but a whole lot more static.
yeah, 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 yeah.
Are you just agreeing because you're like, man, it's too late now to talk about these philosophies? I drag you into these Zoom recordings this late. You're like, man, my brain is frozen about left nav and record views. But maybe it's a good place to checkpoint. Looks like we're saying it's going to be both and both for data
Yeah,
as well as for the visual side of things. Like, sorry, not visual,
yeah,
but UI side of things. There's going to be structured
yeah,
UI, unstructured UI. There's going to be structured data and unstructured data.
yeah, yeah.
We talked
Like,
about the role of voice.
yeah,
We talked about the role of the agent
hmm,
in terms of eliciting more information.
yeah,
And we also talked a lot about the design piece because we can't be a Clippy
yeah,
in this case. And it's not an easy problem because it's not just prompt engineering, but also back-end models. Like, okay, am I
hmm,
going to do prompts with like 7 prompts that are static? I mean, actually, it goes back to static versus dynamic there as well.
hmm, hmm,
Because you, for an SDR, you can keep asking them the same questions every week
hmm,
because they're so top of the funnel
hmm,
and they never lead a opportunity all the way down.
hmm,
That they don't need to be doing dynamic things.
hmm,
But for a rep who is actually traversing all the, going down the funnel, it needs to be a
hmm.
whole lot more dynamic,
Yeah, yeah.
right?
This is where I guess I would say that most problems in computer science can be solved with a layer of indirection.
Yeah, and caching.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Uh, I'm looking forward to that indirection from you as well, as to what that will look like. I know there was a couple other topics. One
Yeah.
of them I think is an important piece of this. You said it. I'm going to try to repeat it here, not
Hmm,
paraphrase. Um, I don't think good enough cuts it. And
hmm,
we were talking about this in the context of the model companies, the frontier model companies, the
hmm,
foundation model companies, and their studios and their experiences, like, talk about Claude and ChatGPT.
hmm.
And you said something like the bar for AI is much higher
Yeah,
to bring business impact. So I think the way I want to frame this discussion
yeah,
is in some ways a parallel to 10, 15, 20 years ago with open source, good enough.
yeah,
Why isn't good enough good enough?
yeah,
And you needed a ton of product management to compete with open source,
yeah.
right? Including what 10 years ago was a problem that MongoDB and Redis and Elastic and all these companies had to face against AWS as well, because
Hmm.
there was a company that could just take open source and commercialize the heck out of it and host it for
Hmm.
you and so on.
Yeah,
Um, so I think it's this thing about good enough versus great,
yeah,
and maybe we can tie it back to segments in the market,
yeah,
uh,
yeah.
enterprise versus mid market versus SMB.
Hmm.
So say more on what you said about the bar for AI is much higher for business impact.
So the context in which I was saying that or thinking that was that the expectation from AI is that it's able to handle things at the same level of complexity and intellect as a human being. And we are essentially reducing highly cognitive tasks that humans were doing. It's not like repetitive automation.
Mhm.
And for that, the level of specificity that you need and like the amount of proper context and like thoughtful execution that you need is much higher. Like it's let's take any example, right? Let's take like we've been talking about text to SQL, right? Um, so take text to SQL. You can do very nice demos of like asking a question and getting an answer. And then you go to some team and say that like whatever your data analyst was doing, this thing can now do. And you'll fail miserably unless you put in a ton of thought and a ton of context around what is this data analyst doing? What kind of data sources are they dealing with? What kind of business problems are they solving through analysis? And all of that input goes into what are the nuances in interpreting this data? All of that goes into that text to SQL engine.
Plus the
Then,
riffing that happens back and forth,
yeah,
in
yeah,
some sense, the prompt engineering to the data analyst as well.
yeah, yeah. So until you can package all of that, you just can't do like a quarter of what that data analyst is doing. And so when model companies are talking about like having their own agentic framework and stuff like that, it's highly unopinionated in that like it's meant for everybody. So you can do a lot of common tasks. That's like the least common denominator with these things. But like you want to take an email and polish it, sure, you can easily do that with that framework. You want
So
to,
does it become like a productivity software addition?
yeah,
Similar to the way, Google Docs and email
mm,
and, all those things
mm,
were,
yeah,
versus business software that gets deeper and has relationships to customers and has to
yeah,
look at contracts and has to be doing reporting once a quarter. Because
yeah,
business is also like a funnel of work.
yeah, yeah,
There was productivity software,
mm,
collaboration software, productivity software,
yeah,
because collaboration is extremely informal, like what
mhm,
I do on
mm,
Slack
yeah, yeah,
versus what I do in Notion and Google Docs and Google
mm,
Sheets
mm, mm,
versus what I do in Salesforce.
yeah,
So is that what you mean by,
yeah,
it
yeah.
just stayed at the top level of productivity?
So like I have struggled a lot with this because last year I was trying to build a general purpose agentic platform. And one of the things that I realized was that there's sort of very general stuff that like you can
Quickly, can you pull your camera down because every 10 minutes you're sinking a little bit. Yeah.
uh
I'm,
so
I'm making it too comfortable for you, man.
what I was saying was that there's like these tools are like essentially low code way of specifying a workflow, right? So there's that technology level. And then there's the forward deployed engineering where, like, for this customer, for this problem in this moment, what do they need? Let's go and build everything. And then there's product management in the middle where, like, I want to give what a forward deployed engineer would have given this person, or at least 90% of that, but build it in a way that it's useful for 1,000 different people,
Hmm.
right? And if you don't do this product management piece, then you can either do very basic stuff or like you're looking for a builder persona who's thinking through all the necessary things,
Hmm.
or you jump all the way to forward deployed engineering where you're
Hmm.
building one-off things based on this low-level tooling.
Hmm.
But
Hmm.
to do this product management piece, that like how do I have an opinionated view, contextualized view that's useful for thousands of customers. That only happens when you you have an opinion about what is this for, who is this for, what use
Mm-hmm.
cases is this for.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And
So
that's where,
what's the advice to entrepreneurs and chief product officers and product managers at large? Um, and I'll come back to the analogy of the last 20 years in open source and
yeah,
even
yeah,
even
yeah.
Microsoft 20 years ago versus AWS 10 years ago and so on.
Hmm.
So say more on that.
Um, so it's kind of like there's a value chain that, like, as it gets closer to the customer, it gets narrower and narrower and more specific and opinionated, right? And you need to see how far away from the end customer you want to go so that you get the maximum value of that specificity while still serving all your use cases.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
So,
But
like,
there's two ways to distribute software then.
yeah,
Either you say, "Oh, let me just go focus on the most sophisticated customer, which is basically large enterprise.
yeah,
Um, or within the mid-market, maybe you have to figure out where do you want, which persona is going to be more sophisticated and which other persona.
yeah,
Um, or you figure out the which place in the funnel of work
hmm,
is the highest sophistication where you can actually say, look, here precision matters
hmm,
and
hmm,
ontology matters and so on.
hmm, hmm,
So is there a place for selection here?
hmm.
Because there's collaboration software, productivity software,
Yeah.
business software connecting to
Hmm,
customers and so on. Do they have to select a place to
hmm.
be more specific?
So this comes back to kind of that T-shaped discussion we had earlier in my mind, that you want sort of your T, the vertical part of your T, to be very pointed, but you do need the breadth as well for
Mm-hmm.
it to
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
function.
Maybe just to look at it from the other angle of the way MongoDB had to do it against AWS.
Hmm,
Um, they had to get very specific with, because a simple developer wanted it on the laptop. They're like, hey, I just want to tinker with a Mongo instance on the laptop.
hmm.
And that was free anyway. So if anything, Mongo had to compete with itself and its open source version
Yeah,
to say, okay, how do I be better for the paid version of this?
yeah, yeah.
Even if you ignore AWS commercializing
Hmm,
document DB through
hmm,
its instance of open source of Mongo. So my point is that there has to be, you have to compete with your own open source version, and then you have to compete with AWS.
yeah,
And a lot of it had to become about product management. Am I saying
yeah,
it right?
yeah, yeah. Uh, Yeah,
Packaging,
yeah.
pricing, uh, as a store manager in a retail store, the way you place stuff, like, okay, this feature goes in this aisle and this
Hmm,
shelf, and
hmm,
that's the way we think about it. That's probably the important chess moves you got to play to really compete with yourself, your free
hmm,
version, an open source version that somebody
hmm,
could freely download. Because that was distribution, you had to do this to
hmm,
basically make the word of mouth go.
hmm,
But then you also have to think about what if somebody commercializes it and so
hmm.
on, as well.
I,
But does it actually, I mean, is there an angle that we're missing here about distribution? Um, the fact that entrepreneurs have to really think hard about PLG and word of mouth of PLG
hmm,
as another way to make it really easy for all this depth and ontology and context and
hmm.
great versus good enough to seep into the mass market.
I think the one of the biggest point of friction in distribution for a startup is that nobody knows you. And um, even if they know you, they don't have a reason to spend their exploration budget on you. And by budget, I don't mean
Mind
necessarily
space,
dollars,
yeah.
but mind space, right?
Hmm.
Um, so I think I've been wrestling with this as well. Is like, is is there value that you can give that kind of attracts people to try something and learn more about you for free? That um, that like in so in some ways when you spend money on like ads or like events and stuff like that, it's an attempt to find an interested user, but most of that money just kind of gets lost like
Yeah, I
friction,
mean, of
right?
course, of course. For me, the thing is not about ads and revenue
Mm,
as much as it is about engagement. And I'll tell you why I come back to both and here as well.
mm,
See, because if salespeople went and sold some big dream and a big contract and all that
mm,
stuff, eventually, if your product is not very simple and relates to the grassroots,
mm.
within a year it's going to churn anyway.
Yeah, yeah.
Now, whether or not you use this as a way to seed yourself with paid users
Mm,
is actually a commercial decision.
mm,
But the craftsman in you has to go and look at ease of use and
mm,
even onboarding and
mm.
the gradual reveal as you were talking about
Yeah, yeah.
in a way that you can't. Otherwise, you have to throw a lot of customer success people on the problem and
Mm,
a ton of customer support people on the problem and a lot
mm,
of Zoom meetings between product managers and end users and all that stuff is
mm,
also cost.
mm, mm,
So one has to do this in a both and way.
mm,
And the reason why I'm bringing all this up is like distribution in this day and age will need to involve both PLG and SLG.
mm, mm,
Not PLG from the point of view of commercialization and credit card accepting and all that stuff,
mm,
and ads and so on, but just the fact that it is great for grassroots.
mm, mm,
Um, and I think the bar is higher. Honestly, I feel like I heard somebody say this that it's much harder to build a startup and a company this decade than it was last decade. You know,
mm,
it was actually my co-founder Manoj talking to someone,
mm,
and they're like, "Oh, it's much harder to build a startup
mm,
now than it was 10 years ago." And I think the bar has actually been raised because the problem statements are more sophisticated.
yeah,
And
yeah,
obviously, generating code has become a lot easier, and
yeah,
global
yeah.
workforce is at your fingertips, and so on.
One of the things that kind of is makes it harder to do PLG is that everybody's guard is up in terms of AI. So it's a lot harder to get somebody to try your product if it needs any data from the corporate, even if you're willing to give it for free and have like a strong PLG motion. Like
I mean,
I hear,
it has to be through under the radar work that you have to
yeah,
do with PAT tokens and personal access tokens and things like that, which
yeah,
uh, and within a small team like of three,
mm,
four people, like what
mm,
Slack had to do. But you
mm,
have a
mm,
valid point that at the end of the day, if the systems that you have to connect to don't have a PAT token,
mm,
how do you do this? Maybe one has to think hard about greenfield projects and greenfield teams and
mm,
where the data will actually accumulate now, but not really
mm,
from
mm,
before. I think it's a very important design problem just as
mm,
much, that how do you do the cold start problem when you not don't have PAT tokens to your existing systems,
mm.
right? But does Salesforce have personal access tokens?
Not that I'm aware of.
You should research
Yes.
then.
Yeah, yeah.
But you're right. I think, if you're not able to kind of go in and have tentacles into existing data, then how do you really do some of that stuff,
Yeah, yeah,
especially in business software. I think had it
yeah.
been productivity, you could say,
Mm,
look, I think you can do empty canvas like a Miro board, like who cares?
yeah.
I don't need to have access data. or to Slack channels, like, man, we're just going to generate new data, forget about old data,
Yeah, yeah,
and you will
yeah.
forget about this data 3 months from now, or, 3 weeks from now, or 3 hours from now,
Yeah,
So there's something to be said about that funnel of information in some sense as well,
yeah.
It's it's been one of those, I mean, where we probably can keep coming back to the last subtopic quite a bit more about
Mm,
product management, packaging, pricing,
mm,
good enough versus great,
mm,
segments of the market, you know, and section of the work funnel, all this stuff. Maybe it's another episode to be talking about.
yeah.
I think I'll push you hard, you push me hard. It'll actually be a great riffing that we can do to really think hard about, and everything that even Microsoft did to a lot of companies 20 years
Mm,
ago, 25 years ago, good enough, why do you need
mm,
anything better, but how did companies emerge? How did Workday emerge? How did ServiceNow emerge? How
mm,
did Salesforce emerge? Because there was a good enough Microsoft software that did that job,
mm,
and if anything, what we're seeing from the frontier model companies right now, I think in 90s and 2000s was either open source
mm,
or Microsoft,
mm,
and it was easily distributed. In many ways, you can go to Best Buy and buy a piece of software for that, including business software that you could have bought from channel partners and so on.
mm,
So I
mm,
think it's a really good episode to go deeper into and understand aspects of design, product management, and even distribution.
mm.
Yeah, shall we do that?
Yeah, yeah.
Awesome. Well,
Uh.
I'll let you sink in. You know, I'm gonna wager a guess that you're not even wearing a jeans or a pant underneath you.
Let's not go there.
I think, you know what? Honestly, the more I look back at this episode, so
Mm,
I've never recommended episodes to my employee that Deborah, but this
mm,
one, I felt that I got the, and maybe this is recency
mm.
bias, that this is worth watching for every designer, product manager, entrepreneur, and also all the data people out there who are thinking hard about money. And, how do you really live in this new world? What do you think?
Yeah, no, I think you pushed me lot on a bunch of topics, which was fun to kind of riff on. And yeah, I think it'll come out well.
Awesome.
It'll,
Awesome.
yeah.
Okie dokie. Have a good
Okay.
night and we'll see you soon.
All right.